Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and I'm a man-child. So basically, I was watching Sticky Goose, uh, who has returned, and he basically, I don't know why he does this, but it's actually a good thing and a bad thing. So he basically said that he compared the comic book community to Peter Pan, and that we are a group of man children who are chasing something that we can never actually achieve, rather than focusing on growing up and living in the real world. Okay, so there is some truth to it. Like, that's why actually last week I did a video where I was saying, hey, the comic book community needs Sticky Goose. And there is some truth to that. We need these kind of outsider opinions. And I actually think that's important because discussing the hobby is, from all perspectives, is actually something that enhances the hobby. And it makes us see different ways of viewing it. Like, it's sort of like how how my spouse might view the hobby would be very different than the way I view the hobby. I mean, she hates she hates comic books, but I think it's because a lot of people don't that are outside of it don't really understand it. And I would say Sticky Goose is in that lot where he doesn't really understand the hobby. And I want to kind of say some good things and bad things about the hobby. And I can speak from my own perspective on that. So one of the things that I would say about the hobby, and this is, I've met, some pretty big collectors, and I'm a big collector myself. And one aspect of the hobby is we're borderline hoarders. Borderline. And the thing that makes us different than a hoarder is that we are refined in the way we do it. And we don't just, gravitate to anything. We're very niched and very targeted. And we have our own, like, preferences for what we were collecting. And it's sort of like any collecting kind of hobby. The people that collect, they do so because they want maybe to fill a void in their life. I don't know what it is, but there is a desire to have something. And it's not just some random desire. Like, a hoarder actually just doesn't want to give up things. Whereas a collector wants to attain things, and for a very specific goal. Okay? And that's important to understand, that there's a goal in mind. Collectors will have checklists. They'll have like that kind of cataloging and that research that they do to try to find what they're looking for. And they are looking for something. There is a goal in mind. This is very different than what a child would do. Children can be collectors as well, but it's different. There is a certain maturity, actually, that is required to be a comic book collector. I know, I don't want to sound like a snob in saying that, but there is a certain maturity that's required because you have to develop those skills of discernment. You have to know what you're looking for. You have to know how to look. You have to learn how to do the research. So there's a little bit of maturity that is required. It's sort of like, I wouldn't call art collectors man children. It's the same with comic book collectors. They're not man children because there's sophistication behind what they're collecting, the way that they collect. And that's really important to understand. And people that are outside the hobby might see it as a bit random, or might see it as a bit, like these men like myself, just trying to relive their childhood and beating the Peter Pans. They don't, they wouldn't see that that sophistication that actually is part of the hobby, and that real way of thinking that is different than what a child would think. Or there's so much more to the hobby than just a bunch of middle-aged men trying to relive their childhood. The comics, for example, that I collect have nothing to, like, most of them have nothing to do with my childhood. I collect Golden Age. Golden Age is not my childhood. These are books that are from my father's childhood, maybe. Even he would be a bit young for them. He would have been too. He was like, my father's like in his 80s, but these books that I collect are 80s, so he was barely a child at the time these books came out. So, these books are not about reliving one's childhood always. It can be, and there are nostalgic buys. I buy a lot of things for nostalgic reasons, but a lot of it is like a desire to find things that are of a certain characteristic. So for me, I really enjoy the Golden Age. I go down these rabbit holes of collecting certain artists, collecting certain art styles, even, where I might not even know who the artist is, but I like a certain style, that Golden Age style, very different from the modern age. And I collect those kind of books. People that are modern age collectors will have their own kind of thing that they're looking for, and they will go down their own rabbit holes. But the point is, there's a certain sophistication in that, where we're not just man children running around, being children and collecting toys. It's a little bit more sophisticated than that, and it's not about money. A lot of the things that the reason a lot of people like myself do it is it's a side hobby. It's a hobby that balances out the real world that we live in. And that's really important about the hobby, that we are balancing out the stressful lives that we might live, where, there's no point in working if at the end of the day you have, sure, you have a house, sure, you have a car, and you have food on the table. Well, that does not make a person. that you become like a little cog in a wheel, in a machine, I should say, but you're not a full person. You're just living. You're not really living. We need more than just, the day-to-days. We need something to feel like we've achieved something greater. And having a hobby, having that something which balances out that just tedium of the day-to-day is important. Some people do it through comic book collecting, some people do it through sports or through whatever, but there is that balance that you need, where it's work and play kind of idea. And it's not child play. I mean, as I said, we're not children. It is that idea of attaining something, building something that is maybe a curated collection, something that shows one's own way of thinking. Like, if you look at the stuff that I collect, you can kind of get a sense of my personality, of who I am. And each collection, it works the same way for other collectors. You get a sense of who they are as an individual and the types of books that they like. And that's really important, that we're not only are we trying to fill a void maybe, or balance out our day-to-day, but we're really trying to create a reflection of ourselves, where we're using the comic books as a medium for expressing ourselves, that we're developing this, collection of things that reflect the kind of persons we are. I see it the same with women. My mother was really into Hummel figurines and different knickknacks, but you could see her personality in those things that she collected. And I think that's part of the collector gene, that we are expressing ourselves through our collections. And people that are, coming into the hobby might not get it, might not see that being reflected in it. But people within the hobby can really see it. Like, when I see somebody else's collection, I know what kind of person they are. just from the style of the books that they pick up. And a lot of the time you can, even based on the style of books that they like, you can say, oh, did you know about this book? And it's a way of really getting to know each other, because we can say, like, if they like this book, then this is the kind of person they are. If they like this book, then they're a different personality. And each, really is a reflection of ourselves. And that's important. As I said, we can't be just day to day, living like for paychecks and putting meals on the table and keeping the lights on. That can't be life. If that's our lives, we might as well just give up now, because there's no meaning in that. And comic books are a way of establishing meaning, giving reason to exist, not just existing. So this is my man-child explanation of some of the reasons why we do this hobby. I'm going to also reflect on some of the things that Sticky Goose said. He really did reflect. He saw us as Peter Pan, and there is a bit of that. We are, tapping into our youth to a certain extent. Comics were originally intended for younger people, a younger audience. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Tapping into one's youth, one of the things that there's sort of a meme or like anecdote or whatever you might call it, where if you hang out with younger people, you will stay young. Well, by collecting comics, we are kind of maintaining our youth in a way. And it's not a Peter Pan kind of way of doing that, but it is a way of staying young, because we are keeping our minds active, and we're also, giving ourselves purpose and meaning. Very important things. It's usually when people lose those things, when they give up all of their childhood things and move on, that they actually they kind of lose purpose in life in a way. It's horrible to say, but giving up your childhood things in a way, we don't play with our toys. We don't go ooh, like that, but what we do is we enjoy the hobby in a way that is mature. So you're not looking at it as a child, but you're looking at it as an adult, and you're still enjoying and engaging with either artwork or the stories inside, but you're doing it as an adult. And there's a big difference. I sometimes it's hard to explain, because I'm trying to explain it to those people who are outside of the hobby. Like, people that are inside the hobby or appreciate the hobby will get it. I believe the Sticky Gooses of the world might not get it. They might appreciate the stories, and that's why they'll appreciate the omnibuses versus the actual like single comics, but they don't get the reason for why collectors want that original copy, that individual comic book, because there is history associated to that book, and that's what the comic book collector will appreciate. So some of the bad things about the hobby, and I kind of hinted at this early on in this video, is that there is the bit of that cutting edge between between being a hoarder and being a collector, and it can be really, really a fine line between the two, where we do kind of hoard a lot of the books. We get a lot. We might have collections of thousands of books within any particular collection, and that is borderline hoarding. As I said, the things that distinguish it are the fact that we curate, we catalog, we kind of organize the hoard. But there is that danger of being a hoarder and spending too much money on it, for example, or putting out too much resources or having too much money tied into our comic collections. That can be a problem. That is definitely a problem. I have that problem where I have a lot of money invested in this comic collection that is just going to sit there, and it's going to wait there until I die. and maybe it could be better utilized for better things, but this is what I chose to utilize it for. There is a bit of that childlike way of thinking where maybe an adult would say, well, I should really use this money instead of investing it in my comics. I should use it to pay my son's tuition or my daughter's new car or something like that, or upgrading my house or whatever, some other noble task. And that's probably true. That's why you have to be very careful as a collector not to go over that line where you're sacrificing things that are actually, needed in your life versus things that you just want for the sake of the collection. And I try to balance that out personally. I have all my tuitions paid for my kids. I have, all that sort of sorted out already before I did this hobby. So, I always recommend, find that balance between, being a responsible adult and being the collector. And, there can be some, battle there. But that is one of the downsides of the hobby, that we are collectors, and I think there is that bit of that hoarder inside of us that we desire things we a little bit uncontrollable sometimes. So that's why, as I said, if you're a mature collector, you control those urges, and you deal with the day-to-day first, then the collection is a hobby and is your oasis. I always talk about the hobby as being my oasis from my work. I work very long hours, and this is my oasis. So it's one of those things I think people don't realize about the hobby, that the people that do it are not just man children. So I was joking about calling myself a man-child, but it's we are generally responsible adults, and most of the people that I met in the hobby kind of fit that persona, that they are responsible and they enjoy the hobby. There's a few people that probably go a little bit too far, and I sometimes go too far myself. But the point is, for the most part, I think most people are responsible, especially if you're buying Golden Age. You generally have to have a certain amount of income. In order to attain that kind of level of income, you probably had to work hard at some point in life in order to afford those books. So it's a little hard to be a man-child and do that hobby, especially the Golden Age. So this has been my take on Sticky Goose's thing. I do enjoy the fact that he puts his ideas out there, and it's always good when somebody is an outsider and they give their opinions, because they're usually wrong, but they at least bring that discussion to life. I really think Sticky Goose should open up his comments and allow people to have that discussion. I really do think that one mistake, and I do want to defend Sticky Goose on this one thing, is don't make the mistake of responding to Sticky Goose in a way where you're trying to tear him down as a person. Don't tear down the person, tear down the argument. That's so important. I really want people to understand that. Like, whenever there's drama in the community, it's always people tearing down each other rather than the arguments that they present. If you don't agree with what I say, fine. Fine, I don't care. Give me a reasonable reason for why you don't agree with me, and maybe I'll even change my opinion based on your arguments. But if you just try to tear me down as a person, I'm not going to really listen to you at all. So it's always best to try to address people's arguments rather than try to insult or degrade the person that said those arguments. So I actually do enjoy Sticky Goose's takes, though I do not agree with them. I got in trouble for even having that opinion. It's a funny thing. I had this one guy who was all upset with me because I said that, I believe that Sticky Goose should have the freedom to say his opinions even if I don't agree with him. And he's like, oh, so you like Sticky Goose? You agree with Sticky Goose? I'm like, no, I just said I don't agree with Sticky Goose, but I do like seeing alternate opinions, even ones that I don't agree with, especially ones that are a little bit out of left field. I find Sticky Goose's arguments generally are a little bit left field, out of what I would normally think, because he really doesn't understand. He is a newbie to the hobby. He hasn't really gotten it, and that's kind of the more interesting take for me, because I find, when you're in the hobby, you see the, you don't see the forest for the trees. You're sort of in the trees. You don't see the bigger picture. And sometimes it takes that outsider to really give a different take on the whole thing. And, sometimes they can bring in valid arguments. Some of the things Sticky Goose said may be true. We can be a little bit Peter Panish on occasion, but I do think there is sophistication there. But my point is, I always address people's arguments rather than trying to degrade them or take them down. So that's really important. I wanted to stress that extra at the end of this video, because I want people to really engage with me, for example, with the arguments I put out, but also with him and others like him that will put out arguments where they don't understand the hobby. And we are the ambassadors of the hobby because we are the ones that are collectors. We have to not only show that we are not man children, we have to show that we are wise in what we're doing. And if we just get all upset and tear people down and like call them names, and like that's a child way of doing it, and then we're just reinforcing the very argument that they put forward, because we were acting like children by just throwing words out, throwing insults out rather than actually addressing their valid concerns. So that's my take. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me your feedback in the comments below. Appreciate them always. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.